sou Sylvia Hartmann e você está assistindo ou ouvindo ao RemotaCast, o seu podcast sobre trabalho flexível. Aqui eu converso com quem está na vanguarda do trabalho remoto ou híbrido no Brasil e no mundo. Essa temporada é uma produção da Remota com oferecimento da Logitech. Para trabalhar de qualquer lugar com qualidade, presença e colaboração, a tecnologia certa faz toda a diferença. Com webcams, headsets, mouses e teclados, a Logitech é a parceira ideal de quem leva o trabalho flexível a sério. A empresa ainda conta com inteligência artificial para aprimoramento de som e imagem com foco em performance e ergonomia. Torne a sua rotina mais produtiva e a sua cara com Logitech. Aponte a câmera para o QR Code na tela ou clique no link na descrição do episódio e conheça a linha completa da Logitech. Muito bem-vindos, muito bem-vindas a mais um episódio do RemotaCast, o podcast onde eu trago os bastidores, formas de pensar, as boas práticas e os desafios de quem está na vanguarda do trabalho flexível e do futuro do trabalho. E hoje eu preparei uma surpresa especial. O nosso convidado é o Neil Redding, que vem direto de grandes eventos como o SXSW, o Hacktown, que aconteceu aqui no Brasil, e muitos outros sobre inovação e inteligência artificial, e ele veio conversar com a gente aqui no RemotaCast. Se você preferir acompanhar este episódio com legendas em português, é só assistir no canal do RemotaCast no YouTube. You're very welcome, Neil. It's an honor to have you here. Thank you.
It's an honor to be here. Muito obrigado, Sylvia. Muito prazer. Muito pouco português.
Evolving
since you've met. Pouco a pouco, muito prazer.
Nice. Could you, I think to get started, could you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. So in a professional context, I describe myself as the near futurist, which you mentioned, Sylvia. I have a 30-year career in technology after studying computer science and philosophy and actually a little bit of music. I got to college on this music scholarship for piano. And so I have this very kind of multidisciplinary humanities, science kind of mode that I see. The way it's played out over my 30-year career has been they all kind of interplay, and I'm very interested in the connections and surprising connections between things. So after like 15 years of software engineering and building software, and then another 15 years or so, last 15 years running innovation teams at big companies, creative agencies and architecture firms and custom software firms like ThoughtWorks. Past few years, I've been doing more and more keynote speaking within this context of what I call near futurism, because the world is and things are just changing so fast now that I argue that traditional ways of dealing with the future, like foresight or prediction or trends, they can be valuable, but my argument is things are arriving so fast that they're not enough, right? So I look at how we can connect the kind of new emerging possibilities that technology enables that are arriving every week now and dial those into practical value for businesses and brands that I work with and for the leaders that I speak to. So connecting possible and practical is how I describe near futurism. I think that's also the context in which we met, Sylvia, right? Which was the CHRO or HR gathering at Hacktown a few months ago. And I imagine some of your listeners are familiar with Hacktown, or maybe they even went to Hacktown.
Neil, how about AI? How did you get to this very specific topic? What was the turning point? Because I know you mentioned technology and everything else, but why and how did you get to AI?
Sure. So, as someone who studied computer science, and this was back in the late 80s, early 90s, right? So I'm that old. AI, many people may not be aware that AI has actually been a named area of research and development in computer science for a long time, at least since the 1950s. So, we're talking 60, 70 years already. And like many technologies, there have been these breakthroughs, and then many years of stagnancy. It's kind of a weird English word, but like many years of just not much happening, like not much advancement. And but in high school and college in the 80s and 90s, I was doing working with AI that was state of the art at that time. And so throughout my career, I have, while I'm not an AI developer exactly, I've stayed very close to what's possible with AI, and, in the context of working for brands and large enterprises, led teams that will bring in various kinds of AI for personalization, for dynamic kinds of interactive interfaces, especially in spatial computing and VR, for understanding the shape and the material of a physical space so that you can start to provide navigation insights, mobile apps, things like that for retail. So AI has been how would I say, like sort of part of the infrastructure in various ways for a long time, for decades. And when we say AI today, it's of course this very extreme focus on generative AI. It's kind of short for generative AI, right? Which is these large language models, which are these chatbots, ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and so on that we've been using the past few years. And kind of also then the visual tools, right? So Midjourney and DALL-E and even ChatGPT and Runway for video, and Google's VO2 and now Sora 2 or VO3, right? And Nano Banana. Like this summer, right? This past few months has been amazing for AI video generation as well, of course. But that's just to say, Sylvia, I've been involved in AI for a long time and been always looking at like how can it deliver increased value for connecting humans with software, with digital capabilities. And so now, of course, the past couple of years and more every month, right? If AI is enabling incredible new capabilities that are very exciting and sometimes scary as well. And certainly, as we were talking about before the call, compelling us to figure out like how do we as humans live and cohabitate, right? Sort of share this world, this industry, this near future, these coming years, with AI, which I argue is becoming much more than a tool. It's more like another species that we share the world with.
Yeah, I recently I normally listen to books, a book called Co-Intelligence, Co-Living, Co-Working with AI. Amazing. Very, very good. And I understood a lot more than I used to before just by using the two.
Yeah. Highly recommend Ethan Mollick. You can follow him on LinkedIn or Twitter or X. And yeah, that book of his it's actually about 16 months ago he published that. But it's one of those things where it's a mental model, right? The title Co-Intelligence, right, is and you hear Microsoft using Copilot, and a lot of people talk about Copilot, but I mean, I would highly recommend that. I mean, someone asked me the other day, where should I start? What one book should I read? And I think that's, if you're going to read a book, it needs to be something that is not just about the latest technology, but it's a mental model, right? And he offers like, here's how to think about engaging with AI. It is a co-intelligence, right? So yeah, I love that.
A sua empresa é remota, mas o trabalho não flui como deveria? Ou você adotou um modelo híbrido, mas cada área funciona de um jeito, não existe alinhamento entre as lideranças, causando insatisfação na equipe, e no fim das contas, ninguém segue as regras? Aqui na Remota, te apoiamos a implementar o trabalho flexível com intenção e consistência. A partir do nosso assessment organizacional, o Remota Scorecard, fazemos um diagnóstico completo do seu modelo de trabalho, apoiado em dados, e entregamos para você um relatório completo com informações, boas práticas, pontos de melhoria e como você pode ter um trabalho flexível sustentável. E se a sua empresa já tiver práticas estruturadas nos modelos flexíveis, a gente reconhece isso com o selo Remote First da Remote. Aponte a câmera para o QR Code ou clique no link aqui na descrição do episódio e agende uma reunião.
Yeah. And just a quick parallel and something, curiosity about remote work. The first time that someone talked about working remotely, when they coined the name telework, it was in the 70s.
And it was telework, right? So it's like...
It was telework. Yeah, it was telework, exactly. It was the replacement of any commuting to work by the use of technology that at that point was still very poor compared to what we have right now. And it's still, it's 20 years after you guys started studying AI, by what you just told me. So telework is late. AI came
yeah. AI in the 1950s, of course, was very primitive because computers were the size of a whole room. And but the ideas that were foundational to artificial intelligence were quite early. And in fact, even going back to the 19th century, the 1800s, the early work on computing, like the whole idea of machines that can compute. Very early, of course, there was this idea of machines that could be intelligent, right? Machines that could predict the future, or and there was a whole lot of scams, right? There was this thing that was called a mechanical Turk, right? I don't know if you've heard about this, but somebody would take this machine around to different fairs, kind of carnivals or trade shows of the day in a way, right? And say, this machine is like a mechanical, Turk, which was like a reference to a Turkish person, but at the time, I guess it was like someone who can do your work for you, right? And it's a machine that can interact with you, have a conversation. This was like in the 1850s or something. And it turns out it was a scam. There was actually a person inside it, inside this box. But anyway, I'm just saying the idea, it's a funny story if you want to look it up, Mechanical Turk, but the idea that machines could be intelligent is an old idea. It's probably 100 years before even it was possible to start creating software that was intelligent in some way. So it's an old idea, but we're finally getting somewhere, I would say, with AI.
What is the current state of AI right now, of AI adoption, development and adoption?
It depends on how we want to answer that, right? I think, a few things that come to mind, right, is that there's almost 1 billion weekly active users on ChatGPT, which is a pretty significant number globally. I think ChatGPT is accessible in almost every country outside of China. But it's only a couple years old, and so it's gotten to 1 billion users very quickly compared to anything that's come before, right? So that's one way of answering the question, right? Is how many people are using it frequently, like at least once a week. Another way of answering it might be from a business perspective, and there's been a lot of news and conversation in the industry based on a few different studies this summer that, from MIT and KPMG and so on, that one of the recurring themes is that big companies are not seeing so much value from AI yet, even though they're spending a lot of time and resources. And there's a lot of conversation about why that is. My opinion, and I think the opinion of people who are really, really using it, is that the main lesson to take away from that is that trying to sort of add AI to your existing processes is a failure mode, right? It's not a useful approach. AI is different enough from existing software that the companies that are getting value, the people that are the professionals that are getting value from it, instead of trying to say, okay, I already have this XYZ workflow, I do X, then I do Y, then I do Z. Take a step back and say, do I actually need to do X or do Y? Maybe there's some other way to produce Z, produce this outcome, because AI works quite differently from other tools. And So startups that are just built, from the beginning using the capabilities of generative AI are seeing amazing, amazing benefits, right? Like what a startup of 5 or 10 people is able to create using these tools is just incredible compared to like companies of a few hundred, you know? So that's another aspect to your question, right? What's the state of AI right now? Another answer to the question, and I'll stop with this, is sort of what is the impact on the world of business, capital allocation, energy, even water use, resource use generally, right? Because essentially AI is at a place now where, like in the US, right? The US, I think outside of China, the US is investing by far the most capital and resource in AI right now. But economic growth, like the growth in GDP, right, and economic output of the US is the vast majority of it in this year has been AI related, AI investment, AI, like mostly AI investment. So it's like AI, and there's like a lot of concern that AI is sort of driving the entire economy, essentially, because so much money and resources being invested in, you just direct investment by VCs, in the AI companies. OpenAI, is now valued at $500 billion. It's probably going to be $1 trillion company as a startup very soon. Anyway, the numbers are crazy. And also, and I know this is a conversation in Brazil as well, the investment in data centers, and energy production is, because the energy needs for all this AI and all these data centers is huge as well. So if we take a step back and just look at that from a human perspective, what is happening with AI is like, it is the demands of AI and the way humans across sort of the business world and the investment world are responding is like giving AI so much of our resource, our time, our energy, our money, our energy, so we have to pay attention. Like it's arguably sort of the biggest topic of the moment, right? It's it doesn't seem like it's going away anytime soon. And the reason is, unlike say the metaverse or NFTs or whatever was the hot technology the last few years, you and I and everyone who's using these tools are getting value, right? Like they do useful things. So, and often they do useful things for free or for $20 a month, something like this, right? Which is something we can all live with, right? At least in terms of the value for money. So anyway, we could talk for an hour about that. And I know we want to talk a bit more about how this relates to remote work and how we partner and collaborate with each other and all of that, right?
Yeah, but still, I think I see again something very similar from the topic of AI and the topic of remote work. I see a lot of leaders and CEOs and people that lead companies and make decisions with huge expectations for AI, but not investing in people's skills and developing the team. Just by purchasing the tools won't be enough. Just by pressuring the teams to perform better or more by using AI shouldn't be the correct answer. It takes work. It takes a real change management. And I see it very similarly to remote work, because this is where today, the episode that we launched today, I interviewed my advisor when I took my master's degree. And I mentioned AI and remote work. And he said it will be much easier for companies to work and adopt AI than remote work, because remote work shifts the way we've been considering work, or the way we see work for decades. And I understand his point. But on the other hand, I also see that in both cases, both require change management that most companies are not willing to do right now. So I think this is one connecting point for both topics here.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
very, very important. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that, and I think the thing, sort of the remote work transformation and the AI transformation, we could say, and the change management required. I mean, there are things these two have in common as well. A simple thing we could say about what they have in common is that they, like with AI, in order to really get the real benefits, we have to change how we work and change how we work with each other, actually, too, which is the same as remote work, right? So, and because we are physical beings, because we value so much being physically together, I think the remote work was really a difficult transition in some ways, right? Well, when it was forced, right? I mean, we have to talk about the pandemic when we talk about remote work, right? Because like so many people, maybe in so many companies who didn't want or who resisted, like remote work existed for years, right? Like we had the technology, we had Zoom, we had video, we could do it well before the pandemic, but then we all had to do it during the pandemic, right? So,
and it was everyone, and it made it easier that everyone, at least knowledge workers, they were all in the same position.
Yeah, for sure. But I think I'm curious what you think, Sylvia. But I like to believe that because we've all of us knowledge workers learned how to do this, right? How to work with each other differently, that we can apply that kind of flexibility, that curiosity, that willingness to the shifts that AI is compelling, right? Because, and just to be a little more specific, right, it's changing how we work with each other. Well, one of the ways that AI is going to be changing how we work with each other is that some of like some of the others we're working with are increasingly AI agents, right? And this is, if people listen to this haven't seen that yet or haven't had that experience yet, maybe you have. Definitely in the next 6 to 12 months, you will have this experience because more and more of the chatbots that you're already using are starting to offer these agent modes where instead of just, sitting there and waiting for you to prompt it to do something all the time, you can give it a higher level brief and say, right, like for example, like here's all the background research I've done. I need to put this together into a pitch deck, right? And that may require a whole bunch of different things like organizing research, presenting it in visual form, like tables or graphs or charts, and then maybe there needs to be some visuals design, like images design. Maybe there needs to be some photorealistic still images of people in work content. I mean, there's all kinds of, I'm just making it up, right? But all kinds of content that could need to be generated. And so it can take a while to do, but it's the kind of thing that you would delegate if you're a senior person at a company. You might delegate it to an intern or someone, who's smart and resourceful and can just go away. Like, we need this. Here's the brief. Here's the description. And the person can figure out how to pull in resources from different people from different places and then put it all together and organize it into a pitch deck. And this is just one example of the kinds of work that we do, right, as knowledge workers. Point being, AI agents are starting to get good enough where you could actually delegate that not to a person but to an AI, and then it'll come back in a few hours, or if it's really complex and requires a lot of research, maybe a day or two, right? And maybe it needs access to a lot of your enterprise information, right? So it's got to look up on your intranet or on your network, to find all this information. Maybe it needs to interview people and hear what they have to say about something. So all of these are just I'm exploring, right, in the conversation here, like the different ways that we're working with each other And if AI can do these things, then there's opportunity for us to do different kinds of things that only humans can do with other humans that we work with, right? And so I'm curious what you think about this as someone who's really at the forefront of remote work, Sylvia.
Yeah, definitely there are things that will never be replaced by remote, like the human connection, the integration, sharing memories. Those are the types of things that will always work better in person. And this is why many companies, even the ones that are 100% remote, they do organize retreats and moments where people can get together at least once or twice a year. I do feel that the pandemic made us more flexible to even work with new technologies like AI, because at the end of the day, it's all provided or all supported by technology. I mean, AI is the technology itself, but the remote work, the only way it exists is because of technology. When Jack Niles coined the term telework in the 70s, you didn't have much, only the telephone and later the desk computer, the PC. But then today we have all the different technologies that allow for us to work from anywhere at any time with people from like us. Where are you right now?
I'm in New York. Yep.
I am at the coast of São Paulo. I'm not even at the capital. I'm at the coast. This is interesting. See how far you are in New York. And here we are, and this is all provided by remote and by technology. What doesn't mean that we're walking away from being together on personal experiences. The difference here, I think, is what we learn with remote work normally is that you can get a lot more even productive when you learn to work asynchronously, when you learn how to document things, and then you use the personal interactions for greater good, which is humans with humans. So all the rest you can do with technology, with AI, with agents. But once you're together, like we were at Hacktown at the event and everything else, then you get the most out of the human interaction. Please tell me your thoughts on this.
Yeah, it's interesting because it reminds me also of. So I recently spoke to a group of C-suite leaders in healthcare. This was outside Brasilia, actually, also in Brazil, and the connection here is I'm really excited at this set of possibilities that come from being able to delegate a whole lot of this mechanical, administrative, frankly, boring and detail-oriented work that humans are honestly not that well suited to do. And we'll come back to remote work in a second, but anybody who goes to a doctor, right, which is almost all of us, hopefully, like at least once a year, like go see the doctor and make sure everything's good. But like, I assume your experience is similar to mine, and certainly these healthcare leaders were the same, were agreeing. When I go to the doctor, like I get a few minutes, the doctor's mostly looking at their laptop, like capturing data, like looking up other stuff. Like it's not like you and I are having a stronger in-person connection right now than I have with my doctor, right? Because like doctor is just very focused on data entry and like look up and all this other stuff. But I can see that AI and AI agents and software that interacts with all of this data could free up the doctor to be more present, right? Like make more eye contact, like actually deliver the kind of care that really is healing, that really is conducive to our health. And similarly, I think in remote work in general, right? There's the opportunity for us to just be much more present, right? I mean, in English anyway, this word, I really love this word, this idea of presence, right? It's just a single word that describes like the magic of being physically together. And what was interesting during the pandemic is we discovered that even when we can't be physically together, we get so much of the value of presence just from synchronous, like real time, simultaneous communication like you and I have right now, right? Like it's still so much better than in terms of presence, in terms of feeling the value of being with a human than asynchronous work. But as you're pointing to, coming back to your point, there's a way in which asynchronous work can be much more efficient, right? Where people learn how to document what they've done so that it can be passed on to the next person in a workflow, or so that like with writing in general, right? I mean, humanity going back thousands of years, like when we learned to write, we were able to pass knowledge on from generation to generation, where like before written language, right? Like knowledge would just get lost if there wasn't someone around to tell you verbally, right? So like written language, or in our work, like a written capture of what you're working on is hugely valuable. But again, this is a place where AI can be super, super valuable, right? Like I could just be doing a bunch of work and I could point an AI to whatever it is I'm creating, and the AI could create documentation. It could create a summary of what I've done that could then be handed off to another human, another agent, right? So these are just some examples, right, of ways in which AI can, I think, really support remote work, really support asynchronous collaboration, as you're saying, Sylvia, but then also by doing these things, free us up to um, absolutely, we should get together on physical retreats, right? But like even when we're not, like for example, I mean, you and I think we're both we have AI note takers for this conversation, right? And so that frees me up, so I don't have to worry about taking notes. I'll just look at it later, right? And so I can be more present in this conversation because of that AI participation. Simple example, we've all experienced it, right? Um, but yeah, so one of the things I like to keep coming back to is we can be more present with each other thanks to all of this, and that's an exciting near future to me.
Nice. Yeah, no, I agree. I think every time a company makes a decision related to the use of technology or related to where it will work, I mean, where it will be based, either remotely or if it's going to expand geographically or not, there will always be trade-offs. I think companies that decide to adopt or keep the full remote, they're going to have access to talents in the whole country. They will probably speed up their technological development and etc. There will be a lot of good things, but also maybe they will have to invest more to train people to be able to be present and to also learn to work asynchronously and to use AI. So I think there will always be ups and downs, pros and cons, and that's the beauty of it. I think companies have to make a strategic decision to either go towards the future or stay and wait. And that's it's like with AI adoption. I think many will just wait and see what's going to happen. Same with remote, although we have the pandemic, which was a turning point. Well, it was, but it wasn't, because so many companies came back to the offices right now that I see we have missed a lot of the opportunity to use all that learning. But anyways, I think some companies are definitely using it for the best. But you mentioned a few very interesting topics. But going back to agents, because when we talk about hybrid, it can be, I mean, in my world, hybrid is office and remote. In your world, probably hybrid is having a team of humans and agents. Do you have examples of companies, real world companies, if you can share, of course, that have been applying or implementing the use of agents with real people, and how is this going out? How is this working actually?
It's still very early days, you know. I mean, any of the companies that I work with or hear about, it's I think the most they'll say or allow to be said is that they're promising early early results. Now, I mean, we're also seeing, even this week, for example, and I think yesterday, Amazon announced that they're going to be laying off something like 14%, I think, of their it's like middle management, desk workers, knowledge workers, and they're very explicit now. Like a year ago, this wasn't happening, but actually maybe 10%. I'm just looking at because I just saw 14,000, I think, of their corporate employees, about 10% of them, which is a very significant number, right? I mean, but they're now being explicit that this is in large degree due to AI being able to take over a lot of this work, right? Now that's not a detailed answer to the question you're really asking, sort of like how are they doing it? But it is creating more clarity about what's happening, right? And one of the things that happens that has been clear for a while about what AI is going to be doing in world of knowledge work is really making middle management not so much a thing anymore, right? Because like in general, middle management is about taking an order from somebody above
Yes.
and then giving it to the people below you, right? And like we don't need humans to do that. And to be honest, like humans, I would say humans are not fulfilled doing that, because it's just not, you're not really adding a whole lot of value. You're really just being a paper pusher, right? As people would say. So,
Yeah, it's always been
um,
shy to be on that position, even
but
before AI.
there's 100%, but there's so many people that are in middle management, right? So it's going to be a huge, huge shift. But getting back to your question, it's still early days, but I would say, and because it's early days, people and companies and teams that have been seeing value by bringing in agents are really they're kind of blazing their own trails, right? They're like inventing new workflows and new ways of doing this, which is why, when I speak, when I deliver keynotes, and I've also been doing this thing that I call a key shop, which is like a slightly extended interactive workshopy kind of version of a keynote. I have leaders that will break up into groups that are kind of cross-functional teams, if there's enough of them, like organized by industry, so they understand what their use cases are, sort of the most important use cases, and think about, okay, here's the business value we're trying to create with this scenario. What could we start? What are the tasks involved, and what could we start experimenting with delegating to AI or to an agent, just to see, right? Because I think just like you hire a new junior person or an intern, right? You don't give them a huge responsibility at first. You give them something small, like see how they do, and then you keep giving them more if they do it well, right? Same kind of thing is what you want to do with AI. So we could talk more about the how and kind of how I'm guiding executives to start thinking in this way. But the direct answer to your question is, I think it's still very early. Like I'm not seeing enough real sort of specific evidence yet. And again, going back to the earlier point, but with big companies, the general sense is that they're having a hard time getting a lot of value out of AI. And I think there's a bunch of reasons for that. But I think the simple summary is that they're trying to basically keep the business model the same, and then just like see if AI can just be like, caffeine or like some kind of like, drug that speeds everything up or makes it more efficient. But it just doesn't work that way, So that it takes more like workflow re-engineering. And this is part of the change management that you're pointing to, Sylvia, right? I think it's not just change management in the sense of like helping people with the sort of internal work of now having some of your coworkers be AI, right, or thinking about delegating to AI agents, but it's also the process work, or like the operating procedure kind of work of um, allowing the business model and the way things are done to change, right? So
And
yeah.
no, there's definitely a lot of resistance. Normally, we have a lot of researchers and entrepreneurs and executives at this global remote community. Especially, there's a community called Running Remote that I'm part of. And even we speak of remote, we get it once a year. Depends. And this year, for example, it was Austin, end of April. But what they say a lot, what we've been coming to understand is that companies that are well prepared to work remotely, meaning learning how to work asynchronously, learning how to communicate well, and learning how to document and etc., will be much more suited and prepared and mature to have a good adoption of AI. What are your thoughts on this? What is your perception on this idea?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think and you're much more expert in remote work than I am, but we've already touched on this, right? I think there's a way in which when you work remotely, you have to be much more rigorous and determined, right, about how you document and hand off and interface, your work with other people that you're collaborating with. And because I think before the pandemic or before remote work, I think mostly the way people would convey information to each other or develop a shared understanding of something so that they could work on the same thing would be they would just hang out and have a conversation, right? And the conversation could feel really good, like you feel like you're connected with someone, but it also might not be very efficient because you're talking about your family or your dog or like what movie you went to see or whatever it is, which is great. And it needs to happen. But I think with remote work, I mean, the most distinct and obvious aspect of remote work is something that we often don't think very much about compared to physical co-present work, which is that everything has to be scheduled, right? Like you don't have remote meetings or conversations with people without putting it on the calendar and scheduling it, right? I mean, some people maybe they do.
Unless you call, I mean, you can always call someone and can I have a quick chat?
You can do. I don't know. And I think this varies by culture, but
I mean, what I'm mentioning here, we don't do. People don't do it. There is a
you're
way.
saying you could do it. That's like you could do it, right?
No, people don't. They schedule a meeting. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I realize it's a little bit cultural. Like when I was a few years ago, I was working with some folks from a Chinese office. I was at ThoughtWorks, which is a global technology company, and we had some people that came from the, I think, Chengdu office to New York, and we discovered that like they don't schedule meetings; they just have meetings that And so we were trying to put meetings on the calendar, and they're like, "We don't do that." And we're like, "Well, how do you have meetings?" Anyway, it was just a different kind of culture.
Yeah.
But it seems like Brazil and the US are similar in this way. I think Western countries are like this. But the point is that what happens in person is this serendipity, right? You'd be like, and that's a huge challenge. If I think about the top challenges that remote teams encounter, there's been a lot of conversation, and I'm sure you have a strong opinion on this, around how serendipity is so essential for innovation, right? That like if I'm not physically in the same place with someone and I have to schedule everything, then I'm never going to like run into some person randomly and be like, "Oh, I was just thinking of this and I see you doing this and that gives me a new idea." And then we could like get in front of a whiteboard and sketch something out and imagine some. So like so much of innovation, so many new ideas come from this serendipitous, surprise, unplanned interaction between people. And with remote work, like you really have to work at creating a substitute for that. It's interesting. One company I worked with maybe 10 years ago tried to solve this with their remote teams. They would just have a video call open all the time, all day long. So it's like, I'm here at my desk. I look over here, I see Sylvia, and be like, hey, Sylvia, I'm just thinking of something and we could chat, or you could do the same with me, right? It, again, is possible, just like calling someone out of nowhere. But people don't really do it, right? Because then we get used to, I like my privacy. I don't want someone watching me all the time, right?
But in this sense that you were just mentioning, I think, and I'm also learning that we are so used to the normal ways of doing things that are always around offices. But right now, for example, I'm reading a book called Running Remote, which is very interesting, but it's like
Running Remote.
It's from the owner of the community and the event. He was the one that wrote this book, because they're remote pioneers. They've been out there working remotely since forever, much earlier than the pandemic. And they are almost like 95% asynchronous. It's not just remote, it's asynchronous. And what they say is that when you are remote and asynchronous, you give the opportunity for people that are introverts or shy people that sometimes can be very, very competent and smart and creative, but these people won't stand out at the offices. And once you learn how to work remotely, you give them a chance to do all this creativity, but in other ways.
Yeah.
But when we think of a specific group of people that goes to offices and interact and everything, it can be easier, but there's definitely other ways. But yes, you have to be much more intentional. There's no doubt you have to be much more intentional about it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, another thing that you're reminding me of is, you were saying earlier with remote work, you have access to people all over the country.
Yeah.
And I would say all over the world, actually. And even more so now, right? And I understand, like, all over the world, then language can become a barrier, right? And this is part of why, like, there's standardization on English, which,
and labor laws as well. All the taxation and labor laws and everything that can be a challenge too.
Can be a challenge.
I mean, we have people traveling all around.
People do. Look, I worked with a company based in Hong Kong a couple years ago, and there were employees all over the world, and they figured it out. I mean, yes, it required some legal, they had legal experts in different places around the world, but like it's there are trade-offs, right? If you want the best people, you want to be available anywhere. But as you're saying, I mean, they're and I would add, in addition to people who are introverted and making it so that they could actually be stronger contributors, and maybe they'd be very shy or have a difficult time interacting in person, right? Some people are like that. But we're almost at the place now where anyone who's seen Star Trek in any of its forms, right, that there's this thing called the universal translator, which is just always there, always present, which is why they can meet some new species on some planet they'd never seen before, and they immediately have a conversation because the universal translator will just translate like their language into your language, and as you speak, they hear you in their language, and as they speak, you hear them in your own language. AI is just about there, right? I think a year from now, you could speak Portuguese, I could speak English, and we could have a easy conversation just like this, not have to worry about it at all. And we're not even speaking the same, each other's same language. So, but just to be very specific, right, to tie that back to remote work, it's like you could then have people who don't speak English or Portuguese, right? Or who knows what other language, and they could still be a functioning person or member of the team, live wherever, speak whatever language, So, there's so much opportunity and promise, I think, with AI, bridging these gaps between people in the world. And of course, there's lots of reasons why it might not do that, or why it might just put everybody out of work or whatever. Like there are amazing opportunities and things that we really need to be concerned about as well.
What are the other emerging technologies that are impacting the way we work and connect and relate, and that maybe could help remote work, or maybe not, but just what else you're from your experience?
So for years, like going back also a couple decades, like in the 90s, I started doing some work with virtual reality, and then didn't do a whole lot then because it was just too expensive and too difficult to use. But starting like 2016, also at ThoughtWorks, I was running this team that was focused on VR and augmented reality, and we did work for clients that was very focused on specifically trying to solve this problem of presence, right? So like we had 10 years ago video calls like this, right? Video conferencing. Zoom is actually about 10 years old. But we felt like, well, we have this virtual reality, like we ought to be able to do better than this. And we did these early prototypes. This was before, within a couple of years, there was actually software you could buy that would do a similar thing. But we used this game engine called Unity that's used to build games, and we would build these prototype simulations of co-presence, where because my motion was tracked, because my eye movements were tracked, because my hand movements and body movements and gestures, doing this or doing this was all tracked. I had an avatar, very simple. It looked like a SpongeBob, right? It was very simple, square avatar, but it had blinking eyes and the mouth moved, and you could hear each other's voices, and we were distributed across continents, but we're in this same virtual space. And so we created this kind of co-presence in virtual reality that in many ways was so much more compelling than this video that we have now, Sylvia. And if you've never had this experience, you just have to take my word for it. I don't know if you've had it, but you're in this VR headset. You have? Yeah. So you're in this VR headset, and because you're in a shared virtual space, it's like, how it feels when someone comes up, say from behind you, and you didn't know they were there, and you suddenly have a feeling that someone's behind you, and you're like, whoa, you get this sense of startledness. This was happening to us. Like we could feel in our bodies the presence of each other, even though we weren't physically there, and even though the simulation was very simple and primitive, like very simple avatars, not photorealistic at all, but because it was dimensional, like the brain actually fills in the gaps, and you feel like these other people are here. And because we would hear each other's actual voices, we felt like, oh, that's Neil, that's Kent, that's whoever. Nice. All of this is to say, does that make sense? So all of this is to say that, virtual reality, I continue to believe, and there are teams that use it to have a much greater sense of co-presence when they meet together, when they collaborate together. You can do virtual whiteboard sessions and design things together. Not a whole lot of teams do this, but the technology is there. And I do think that eventually, as it gets smaller, as it gets more like these glasses, as it gets, I think spatial computing and XR, extended reality technology, VR is part of this, will become common, because it will allow us to really have the feeling, and not just the visual and the audio, but the kind of embodied feeling of being present with each other when we're not physically present. So, it's a slower timeline, certainly compared to AI, but we are seeing some major steps. Like, even though it's very expensive, Apple's Vision Pro is a huge step forward in this area. It's big, it's heavy, it's expensive, and it's it's the worst that it's ever going to be.
Yeah.
Like
It'll just evolve from this point
yeah,
on.
they keep evolving, and in general, when Apple finally released this just a couple years ago, people who like me have been working with immersive technology for a long time, like we were like kind of in tears, because for a long time we felt like, look, well, when Apple does something with VR or with immersive technology, that's when it's really going to take off, because historically that's how it works, right? Like
Yeah.
um with with the with the Macintosh in the 80s, and then the iPod with music players, and then the iPhone and the iPad, like there were tablets before, there were MP3 players before. Anyway, we all understand, right? I mean, Apple has this way of waiting until they see an opportunity to do something for a billion people and then doing it then. That's a long answer to your question of like, what other technologies? I think technologies are, anyone who's interested in that idea of co-presence using VR, you can actually have a pretty good experience of it with, Meta's Quest 3S headset, which last I knew was like $300. So it's in the realm of affordability for people who are really um, who are motivated, to get one.
Perfect. Yeah,
So
the technology was the enabler for remote work, and it will be the tool that will help improving the experience that
yeah,
workers have remotely too. This is a great example. What do you see differently when you talk to Brazilian executives and entrepreneurs? What is different here, and what is your advice for Brazilian companies that are looking to adopt AI and improve their business?
yeah, read Co-Intelligence from Ethan Mollick, right? It's a good starting point if you haven't ever done that. Also, like, have me come speak. I do more and more. I'm speaking to executive teams at different companies and across companies, speaking to more and more executive retreats. So feel free to reach out, and maybe we'll put something in the show notes for that, like my website. But my in terms of Brazil, I described my love for the sort of the culture and the people and the vibe, but like also there's such a strong hunger and intelligence and passion, I think, for innovation and being part of the conversation, being part of the movement to influence how humanity and business show up in this era of AI. And I'm really excited about this. I mean, I see Brazilian companies that are much more um, on top of it, much more enthusiastic and determined than many US companies for sure. So, and I'm speaking more and more around the world. Like, I'm actually going to Bogota in Colombia and Kosovo actually in the next couple of weeks too. So um, it'll be interesting to see. But you know, there's there is a kind of hunger and enthusiasm in Brazil that's really special and really exciting to me. Um, and I do feel like, I guess the second part of your question about what advice would I give, in addition to read that book and bring me in to speak, is especially for leaders, there is no, and this is just in my keynote, there's no substitute for inviting AI in as a participant in your daily work, right? Like we talked a lot earlier about having AI be like a thought partner, something that you work with, something you delegate to. And this is the only way, just like working with people. I mean, working with AI is much more like working with people than working with another piece of software. I mean, it has a flexibility and a humanness in a way. A lot of that is because we mostly interact with AI through language, written language, whether it's English or Portuguese, right? Or it's even voice, you could speak to it. So it's been designed to interact with us in our natural language ways. And just like if you hire a new person, especially a junior person, right, you need to interact with them. If you run a company made of humans, you need to learn to be really good at interacting with humans. And same with AI, like there's no substitute for just direct experience. So I would say to all the executives I speak with, it's like, yeah, choose a platform, or even if you're ambitious, choose a couple different platforms, whether it's like, and there are reasons to use Gemini because it's connected with the whole Google suite. If you use Google Workspace, Google Docs, Google Calendar, Gmail, like Gemini is really tightly integrated with all that. ChatGPT continues to have more and more features all the time. They're very, very fast at introducing new features. And so if you only use two, I would say use those two, especially if you're using Google in your business. But yeah, just take time every day and practice using AI. Ask it surprising things, like talk to it like it's a human. And I think you'll get, we were talking about serendipity earlier, I think you'll get like sort of surprising responses that will help you move in new directions. One of the things I really like that I also have in my keynote is you can have, ChatGPT has this feature called tasks, which allows you to do something like, and they also have this new feature called Pulse. These are slightly different things, but in both cases, they allow you to, so with tasks, it came out in January. And what I did, the first task I created was with a prompt that says, every morning at 8 a.m., give me a strategically aligned, actionable and evocative suggestion every morning at 8 a.m. So it's been doing this like a notification to me every morning at 8 a.m. since January. And so because it knows, because I do all this work and share like what I'm working on with ChatGPT, it knows what I care about. And so it gives me really useful and provocative suggestions every morning. ChatGPT Pulse is different. It also takes all the chats and all the work you've been doing. And if you give it access, it also will take into account your email, what's on your calendar, etc. Every night, it will take all that stuff and decide what's most important for you the next day, do a bunch of research, and then in the morning, you get this feed of articles that are surprisingly relevant to like what you're working on now. And I find it super, super valuable. It's very cool, but it's the sort of thing that, again, it's just, you want to experiment with it. You want to take some time and develop a relationship with it, because that's where you get the most benefit.
Great. Thank you very much, Neo. It was amazing to have you here. Thanks for your time, for all sharing your knowledge. And I hope to see you soon.
Muito obrigado, Sylvia. See, yeah, we'll have to figure out when that can be.
Yeah.
I would love to come to the coast of São Paulo. I've not been there yet. The coast in Brazil, I've only been to Trancoso in Bahia. So,
that's a good one.
which is quite nice also. But yeah, yes. Well, até mais.
Ok, thank you. Até mais. Tchau.
Tchau, tchau.
Obrigada por ouvir o RemotaCast com oferecimento da Logitech. Acreditamos que o futuro do trabalho vai muito além das paredes e que modelos flexíveis, bem desenhados, transformam empresas, cidades e a vida das pessoas. Até o próximo episódio!